The customers thought she was just another night shift worker, restocking books and brewing coffee in solitude. But when gunshots shattered the midnight quiet, they learned that some people carry more dangerous stories than any book on the shelf. Welcome to True Human Tales. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden expertise and protective instincts, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These moments of quiet courage deserve to be remembered. Chapter and verse. Bookstore sat on the corner of 5th and Madison like a literary lighthouse in downtown Portland. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, cozy reading nooks, and warm lighting that made strangers feel like family. During the day, it buzzed with college students and coffee-seeking professionals. But after 10 p.m., when the last customer had left and the front door locked with its familiar chime, the bookstore belonged entirely to Sarah Chen. Sarah had been working the night shift for 5 years, ever since moving to Portland with nothing but a suitcase and a need to disappear into something peaceful. She was 38, slight of build, with reading glasses that made her look academic. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she moved through the aisles with quiet efficiency. The job was perfect for her needs. Midnight to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday. No customers, no small talk, no questions about her past, just her 20,000 books and the kind of silence that helped heal wounds most people couldn't see. Her routine never varied. Check security at midnight, brew fresh coffee in the small kitchen, start with returns, then inventory, organizing new shipments with methodical precision. The other employees knew almost nothing about her. Maria, the day manager, had hired her after a brief interview where Sarah's references checked out perfectly. The part-time staff called her Night Sarah and respected her preference for working alone. What they didn't know was that Sarah Chen wasn't her real name. What they didn't know was that she'd spent 12 years with the ATF's National Response Team, specializing in firearms trafficking investigations. What they didn't know was that the quiet woman who shelved romance novels had once been the federal government's most effective specialist at tracking illegal weapons through criminal networks. Tuesday night started like every Tuesday night for the past 5 years. Sarah arrived at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes early as always, and used her key to enter through the employee entrance. She disabled the alarm system, then walked through the store's 3 floors to ensure everything was secure. The bookstore felt different at night. During the day, it was alive with conversation and the rustle of turning pages. After midnight, it became a cathedral of stories, where every book held human experience in perfect silence. Sarah made her coffee in the small kitchen behind the counter. Black, no sugar, strong enough to fuel 6 hours of solitary work. She'd learned to appreciate simple pleasures after years of living on federal coffee and vending machine meals. Her first task was always returns. Customers left books everywhere during the day, science fiction mixed with cookbooks, children's stories in the poetry section. Sarah moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency, returning each book to its proper home. She knew the store's organization better than some people knew their neighborhoods. Around 1 a.m., she started processing new inventory. Tuesday's shipment included 3 boxes of bestsellers, literary fiction, and rare first editions that made her handle each volume with the same care. At 1:47 a.m., Sarah was in the biography section on the 2nd floor when she heard a soft scraping against the front door. Not random foot traffic, but something deliberate and careful. Sarah paused, book in hand, and listened with attention developed through 12 years of federal training. She could distinguish between legitimate business and criminal activity from audio cues alone. The scraping continued, metal against metal. Someone was working on the front door lock with professional tools that weren't keys. Sarah set down the biography she'd been shelving and moved to the front window with silent steps, staying in shadows and using bookshelf displays as natural cover. She observed the street through gaps in the window display. 3 men outside the front door, one working on the lock with picks while 2 others stood watch. They wore dark clothing, moved with coordination, and carried themselves like professionals, not random addicts looking for quick cash. These were organized criminals. Sarah's mind shifted into threat assessment mode she hadn't accessed in 5 years, escape routes, available resources. Her breathing slowed automatically, heart rate dropping to the controlled rhythm that had kept her alive during federal operations. The bookstore had 4 exits: front door, compromised; employee entrance in the alley, probably watched; fire escape from 3rd floor, risky; and emergency exit behind the kitchen, alarmed but functional. These weren't random thieves. Professional criminals didn't target bookstores for obvious reasons: minimal cash, heavy merchandise, low resale value. They were here for something specific, which meant surveillance and inside knowledge of schedules. The front door opened with a soft click at 1:52 a.m. Sarah was already positioned behind the information desk, having moved there using approaches that wouldn't trigger motion sensors. 3 men entered with tactical precision that confirmed Sarah's assessment. They spread out immediately, 1 heading toward the staircase, 2 moving toward the back where the safe was located. "Should be just the night worker," one whispered. "Woman, alone, no security training. Where's the office?" "Back corner, behind the coffee section. Safe should be there, plus today's deposits." Sarah's federal training kicked in automatically. She counted weapons. All 3 carried handguns, probably 9mm. Their body armor suggested they expected resistance. Their communication was better than most criminals, but not military grade. But they'd made one critical error. They knew a woman worked alone, but hadn't identified which woman. The previous night worker had been a college student who quit months ago. Sarah had avoided leaving any digital footprint connecting her current identity to her federal service record. She moved through the store using knowledge of every blind spot, every sight line, every acoustic dead zone. 5 years of working alone had taught her the space's secrets. The first man was checking the 2nd floor when Sarah reached the employee break room where she kept her personal belongings. In a locked cabinet that looked like cleaning supplies, Sarah maintained something she'd hoped never to need. Sarah's hands found familiar weight and balance in the darkness. A Glock 23, the same model she'd carried for 12 years of federal service, 40 rounds of ammunition in 2 spare magazines, a tactical flashlight, and her old ATF credential, expired but still carrying the weight of everything she'd once been. She'd kept them out of habit more than paranoia. Federal agents never really retire. They just stop getting paychecks. The skills, the instincts, the muscle memory, all of it stays dormant until something activates it. Tonight, 3 armed men breaking into her sanctuary had activated everything. Sarah checked the weapon with movements so automatic they felt like breathing. Magazine seated, round chambered, safety off. Her stance shifted into the position that had served her in confrontations from Miami to Seattle. The rational part of her mind suggested calling 911 and hiding until police arrived. But Sarah knew the timeline. Response time in this neighborhood was 8 to 12 minutes. These men would complete their business and disappear long before sirens arrived. More importantly, they'd used the word deposits, which meant they knew the store's banking schedule. They knew Maria would have left Tuesday's cash receipts in the safe overnight. That level of specific intelligence suggested inside information. Sarah's federal instincts told her this wasn't random crime. This was targeted theft based on surveillance and planning. These men represented the kind of organized criminal activity she'd spent 12 years dismantling. Sarah moved through the bookstore like death itself, using shadows and architectural features to mask her approach. 5 years of working in this space had taught her how to navigate without making sound, but 12 years of federal training had taught her how to move with lethal purpose. The first man was still checking the upper floors, methodically clearing rooms like someone with tactical training. The second man had found the office and was working on the safe with electronic equipment. The third maintained overwatch position near the front entrance. Sarah's approach was textbook federal: isolate and neutralize threats in order of tactical priority, minimize collateral damage, maintain element of surprise until engagement became unavoidable. The man working overwatch never saw her coming. Sarah's hand-to-hand combat techniques were muscle memory from Quantico training and real-world application. Silent takedown, zip tie restraint, weapon secured, 1 down. The second man at the safe heard nothing. Sarah approached from his blind spot, using the office doorway to mask her movement. When he turned around, he found himself facing someone whose calm competence suggested professional law enforcement training. ATF, you're under arrest. The words came out automatically, even though Sarah no longer had authority to make arrests. The man's hand moved toward his weapon, and Sarah's training took over. Controlled pair, center mass, threat neutralized. Her shot placement was perfect, stopping power without overpenetration that might endanger hypothetical innocence. 2 down, 1 to go. The third man upstairs had heard the gunshot and was moving fast toward the sound. Sarah positioned herself where she had tactical advantage. Good cover, multiple escape routes, clear field of fire. When he appeared at the top of the staircase, weapon drawn, he found himself in a classic fatal funnel with nowhere to go but forward into superior positioning. "Drop your weapon," Sarah called out, using the command voice they'd taught her at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Instead of complying, the man opened fire. His shots were wild, untrained, panicked. Sarah's response was surgical, precise shot placement that ended the threat without risking damage to the rare books collection behind him. 3 down, scene secure. Sarah moved through the aftermath with federal protocols that felt as natural as breathing. Secure all weapons, check for additional threats, ensure no wounded suspects required medical attention, call for law enforcement backup using codes she hadn't spoken in 5 years. "This is former ATF Special Agent Sarah Chen, badge number 2447. She spoke into her cell phone. "I have multiple suspects down at Chapter and Verse Bookstore, 847 5th Street. Requesting immediate police and federal response." 43 minutes later, the bookstore was crawling with Portland police, FBI agents, and ATF investigators. Sarah sat in the employee break room, giving her statement to detectives who kept looking at her with confusion. Detective Mike Walsh had seen a lot in 20 years, but this was new. "Ma'am, I need to understand what happened. 3 armed men, professional execution, no collateral damage. It's not typical civilian response." Sarah looked around the break room where she'd found peace for 5 years. "I used to work for ATF, 12 years, National Response Team, firearms trafficking investigations." "Used to?" "Retired, 5 years ago. I just wanted to work with books." Walsh studied the scene. These weren't random thieves. They knew the store's layout, deposit schedule, your work routine. Someone fed them intelligence. Sarah nodded. "Inside job. Someone with access to operational details." Special Agent Jennifer Martinez approached with a folder. "Agent Chen, we ran the suspects through databases. All 3 have connections to a gun trafficking network we've been tracking." Sarah accepted the folder, federal instincts taking over. "What kind of network?" "Interstate firearms smuggling, Portland to California pipeline. We think they were using local businesses as money laundering fronts." Sarah's blood went cold. "You think the bookstore was being used? We think someone was trying to make it look that way. Frame the business, create probable cause for seizure, then acquire the property through Confederates." 3 hours later, as crime scene technicians finished processing evidence, Sarah sat alone among the books that had been her refuge for 5 years. The federal agents had offered her consulting work, temporary reinstatement, a chance to help dismantle the network that had targeted her sanctuary. She'd said no. Not because she couldn't do the work, but because she'd found something more valuable than federal service in these quiet aisles. She'd found peace. Maria arrived at 7 a.m. to find police cars and federal agents surrounding her bookstore. When she learned what had happened, she stared at Sarah like seeing her for the first time. "You're really ATF?" "Former ATF. Very former." "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah looked around the store where she'd spent 5 years trying to forget who she used to be. "Because I wanted to be just Sarah, the woman who loves books and makes good coffee and doesn't carry a gun to work." Maria was quiet for a long moment. "Are you going back? To federal work?" Sarah considered the question. Part of her missed the work, the sense of purpose, the knowledge that she was removing dangerous people from society. But part of her had found something irreplaceable in the simple act of organizing stories, brewing coffee, and existing without violence. "Number, I'm staying here, if you'll have me." Maria smiled. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather have working nights." 6 weeks later, Chapter and Verse Bookstore reopened with upgraded security and a new policy requiring background checks for all employees. The inside source turned out to be a part-time worker who'd been feeding information to her boyfriend's criminal network. Sarah returned to her night shift routine, but something had changed. She no longer saw the job as hiding from her past. She saw it as choosing her future. The skills that had made her an effective federal agent, Attention to detail, pattern recognition, protective instincts made her an even better guardian of the stories that lived in those shelves. She still worked alone, still preferred books to people, still found peace in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. But now she carried both parts of herself, the federal agent who'd protected society and the bookstore worker who protected stories. Sometimes heroes don't retire from service. They just find new ways to serve. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one reading quietly in the corner, surrounded by novels and poetry, carrying skills they hope never to use again. Sarah Chen had tried to escape her past, but when her present was threatened, she remembered that some things are worth fighting for. A sanctuary of books, a place of peace, the right to choose who you become after the war is over. That's the most important story of all. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Sarah? Someone who seemed ordinary until the moment they revealed the depths of their training and courage? Someone whose quiet presence made you feel safer without knowing why? Tell me in the comments where are you watching from today and share their story with us. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. We publish human stories that matter every single week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, sometimes the person organizing books in peaceful silence is exactly who you need when the world goes dangerous.